What if the thing you fear most, losing your home, your family, your future, is actually the thing that finally teaches you how to speak English without freezing up? I got a green card denial letter while holding my toddler. I couldn't even say please without crying. But this story isn't about immigration policy. It's about how a broken system showed me who my real family is, and how you can learn English the same way I did, through a story that hurts, then heals. The shower thought that started it all. Imagine standing under a hot shower, water hitting your face, and suddenly your brain asks a question so terrifying that your knees almost buckle. Not did I lock the door? Not did I reply to that email?
No.
My brain asked me, if they deport you tomorrow, who will pick up your son from kindergarten? Who will know that he's allergic to peanuts? Who will kiss his forehead when he has a nightmare? I was 32 years old, living in a small apartment in Houston, Texas. I had been in the United States for 7 years. 7 years of learning English. 7 years of saying sorry for my bad English before every sentence. 7 years of watching American TV shows with subtitles, then without, then with again, because I felt stupid. And in that shower, with soap in my eyes and a 2-year-old banging on the bathroom door, I realized something ugly. I had spent 7 years surviving, not living. I could order coffee. I could ask for directions.
But I could not fight for my family.
Because fighting requires words. Real words. Words that don't disappear when you open your mouth. Let me back up. My name is not important. Call me Lynn. I came to the U.S. on a student visa, fell in love with an American man named David, got married, had a son, and then the government sent me a letter. A thin white envelope. Inside, one sentence that changed everything. Your application for permanent residence has been denied.
No explanation.
No but. Just denial. I read it 3 times. My hands were shaking. David was at work. My son was watching Paw Patrol on the couch. And I sat on the kitchen floor, holding that letter, thinking, I did everything right. I married a citizen. I paid taxes. I never even got a speeding ticket.
Why?
That was the moment my English learning finally began. Not in a classroom, not with an app, but on a cold tile floor with a denial letter in my hand and a cartoon playing in the background. Because here's the truth that no grammar book will tell you. You don't learn a language until you have something real to lose. Until the words you speak can actually change your life. Until please becomes please don't take my child and help becomes help me stay in the only home my son has ever known. For the next 6 months, I lived in a fog. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. Every time the phone rang, I thought it was immigration officers. Every time I dropped my son at school, I wondered if it was the last time. David tried to help, but he's American. He doesn't know what it feels like to have your entire existence depend on a piece of paper. He said things like, we'll figure it out and don't worry. And I wanted to scream. Easy for you to say. You were born here. Your family has been here for 5 generations. You don't know what it's like to be one mistake away from losing everything. But I didn't scream. Because I didn't have the English words to scream that loud. Isn't that pathetic? I was drowning, and I couldn't even describe the water. Here's where the science comes in, and don't worry, I'll make it fun. Your brain has something called the amygdala. It's a tiny almond-shaped part of your brain that controls fear. When you're scared, your amygdala hijacks everything. It literally shuts down your prefrontal cortex, the smart part of your brain that remembers vocabulary and grammar. That's why, when you're nervous, you forget how to say hello. That's why, when someone asks you a question in English, your mind goes blank. It's not because you're stupid. It's because your amygdala thinks you're being chased by a tiger. And you can't conjugate verbs when you're running from a tiger. So there I was, running from a tiger named green card denial. And every time I tried to speak English, to call a lawyer, to explain my situation to a social worker, to ask a neighbor for help, my amygdala screamed danger, and my mouth froze. I would open my mouth, and nothing would come out. Or worse, broken English would come out. The kind that makes people tilt their heads and say, "I'm sorry, can you repeat that?" And every time they said that, I felt smaller, more invisible, more like I didn't belong here. But then something shifted. One night, my 4-year-old son crawled into my bed at 2 a.m. He was crying. I asked him what was wrong. And he said in his little English voice, "Mommy, are the police going to take you away?" Tommy at school said his mommy said brown people get taken away. I swear, my heart stopped. Not because of what Tommy said, but because my son was afraid, and I was his mother. And I realized, I cannot teach him to be brave if I am not brave first. I cannot teach him to use his voice if I am silent. So I took a deep breath, looked him in the eyes, and said, "No, baby. Mommy is not going anywhere. Mommy is going to fight, and she's going to win." That was the first time I spoke English without fear. Because my love for my son was bigger than my amygdala. And that's the secret. That's the whole damn secret. You don't learn English by memorizing flashcards. You learn it by finding a reason so big that your fear becomes irrelevant. By the end of the story, my story, you will understand exactly how I went from a woman who couldn't say please without crying to a woman who stood in front of a judge and argued for her family in fluent English. And more importantly, you will understand how you can do the same thing. Not with motivation, not with discipline, but with one question: what is so important to you that you would fight for it even if your voice shakes? Now, let me tell you about the lawyer who almost hung up on me. The green card nightmare begins. Let me paint you a picture.
It's Tuesday, 10:47 a.m.
I'm 7 months pregnant, the kind of pregnant where you can't see your feet and your back hurts just from breathing. I'm making a peanut butter sandwich for my son. The crusts are off, because he's 4 and crusts are apparently poison. And then I hear it. The slap of mail hitting the floor through the slot. I waddle to the door, pick up 3 envelopes.
A bill.
A pizza coupon. And a thick white envelope from U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services. My heart does this weird thing. It speeds up, then stops, then speeds up again. I know this envelope. I've been waiting for it for 11 months. 11 months of checking the online portal every morning. 11 months of avoiding phone calls from my mom because I don't want to tell her. Not yet. 11 months of telling myself, it's fine. I married an American. We have a baby. What could go wrong? I open the envelope. I pull out the letter. And the first word I see is not approved. Not congratulations. The first word is denied. Now, here's something funny about bad news. Your brain doesn't process it all at once. It processes it in pieces, like a horror movie where the monster shows up slowly. I read the word denied, and my brain said, no, that can't be right. Maybe it's a denial of something else. Then I read the sentence, your application for adjustment of status has been denied due to insufficient evidence of bona fide marriage. Translation, the government doesn't believe my marriage is real. They think I married David for a green card. I laughed. I actually laughed. Not because it was funny. Because I was 7 months pregnant with our second child. What kind of fake marriage makes 2 babies? What kind of scam lasts 7 years, includes matching IKEA furniture and arguments about whose turn it is to do the dishes? I looked down at my belly. The baby kicked. And I thought, even you are proof, little one. Even you. But the government doesn't care about kicks. They care about paper. They care about forms. They care about evidence. And according to their letter, David and I didn't have enough joint documents. We had a joint bank account, but we opened it late. We had photos together, but not enough from the first year. We had affidavits from friends, but those are low evidentiary value. I read the letter 3 more times. Each time, a new layer of panic. By the 5th read, I couldn't see the words anymore because my eyes were full of tears. Let me tell you what denial feels like. It feels like standing in a burning house and someone hands you a glass of water. It feels like running a marathon and being told at mile 26 that the finish line moved. It feels like someone reaches into your chest, grabs your heart, and says, "This doesn't count." I had done everything right. I had overstayed nothing. I had filed every form on time. I had paid thousands of dollars in fees. And still, some officer in a cubicle, someone who has never met me, never seen me tuck my son into bed, never watched David kiss my forehead when I had morning sickness, decided that my family was a lie. Here's where the psychology gets interesting, and I promise this will help you with your English learning. Psychologists call this cognitive dissonance. It's the mental discomfort you feel when reality doesn't match your beliefs. I believed, if I work hard and follow the rules, I will be rewarded. Reality said, you followed the rules and we don't care. Some by giving up. Some by pretending the bad thing didn't happen. I tried all 3. First, I got angry. I threw the letter across the room. It hit the wall and fluttered down like a sad, white bird. My son looked up from his sandwich and said, "Mommy, why you throw paper?" I didn't have an answer. Then I gave up. I sat on the floor, the same kitchen floor from the shower story, and I cried. Not pretty crying. Ugly crying. The kind where your nose runs and your face turns splotchy, and you make sounds that don't belong to any language. I cried for an hour. Maybe 2.
Time stopped.
And then I tried pretending. I put the letter in a drawer. I closed the drawer. I told myself, I'll deal with it tomorrow. But tomorrow came, and the letter was still there. And the baby was still inside me. And the fear was still everywhere. Have you ever done that? Pretended a problem doesn't exist because facing it feels impossible? That's exactly what most English learners do. They know they need to practice speaking. They know they need to stop being afraid. But instead, they close the drawer. They watch another video. They tell themselves, tomorrow. Here's the truth that hurts. Tomorrow never comes. Not on its own. You have to drag it into the room, kick it, and force it to sit down. That afternoon, David came home from work. I showed him the letter. He read it silently. His face didn't change, that American thing where men think showing emotion is weakness. But I saw his hands. They were shaking. He put the letter down and said, "We'll hire a lawyer." That was it.
No hook.
No, I love you. Just, we'll hire a lawyer. For a second, I hated him. I hated his calm. I hated that he could say we like this was a shared problem when he was the one with the passport. But then I realized, David was scared too. He just didn't know how to say it. Americans aren't taught to express fear. They're taught to fix things. So, he wanted to fix it. He wanted to call a lawyer, write a check, and make the problem disappear. But you can't fix a broken system with a check. You can't fix a denial letter with money. You can only fix it with a story. A true story. Our story. That night, I couldn't sleep. The baby was kicking. My son was snoring. David was pretending to be asleep. And I lay there, staring at the ceiling, thinking about that word. Bona fide. It's Latin. It means in good faith. The government didn't think my marriage was in good faith. They thought I was a liar, a fraud, a woman who would fake love for a piece of plastic. And that's when something snapped. Not in a scary way. In a clear way. I thought, they don't know me. They've never met me. So I'm going to walk into that office or that courtroom and I'm going to make them meet me. I'm going to tell my story. And by the time I'm done, they won't see a case number. They'll see a mother,
A wife.
a woman who learned English the hard way.
I didn't know how.
I didn't know if it would work, but I knew one thing. I would not close the drawer again. That decision to stop pretending is the same decision you have to make with English. You have to stop hiding. You have to stop saying, my English is bad. You have to open the drawer, take out the fear, and look at it. Because the only thing worse than a denial letter is a life spent wondering what if. In the next section, I'll tell you about the lawyer who almost hung up on me and the one sentence that made her stay on the phone. My husband's quiet panic. You know what's worse than your own panic? Watching someone you love panic in a language you can't translate. David is not a crier. He's not a shaker or a talker or a let me share my feelings guy. He's the kind of American man who fixes things. Leaky faucet? Fixed. Broken drawer? Fixed. Flat tire? Fixed. So when we got that denial letter, his brain went into fix-it mode.
He opened his laptop.
He Googled immigration lawyer near me. He made 3 phone calls. He said things like, we have options and this happens all the time. And I wanted to believe him. I really did. But here's what I noticed. He stopped sleeping. Not the cute, I'll stay up late watching Netflix kind. The kind where he lies next to me, eyes open, staring at the ceiling until 3 a.m. He started chewing his fingernails, something he hadn't done since college. And every time the phone rang, he flinched. Not a big flinch. A tiny one. The kind you'd miss if you weren't paying attention. But I was paying attention. Because when you're pregnant and terrified, you become a detective of small disasters. One night, I woke up at 2 a.m. to use the bathroom, pregnancy bladder, you know the drill. David wasn't in bed. I found him in the living room, sitting on the couch in the dark. His laptop was open. The screen glowed blue on his face.
He was reading something.
I walked closer. It was the denial letter. Again. He'd printed it out and was reading it for the 100th time, like maybe the words would change if he looked long enough. I sat next to him. I said, David.
He didn't look at me.
He just whispered, I can't fix this. And his voice cracked. David's voice never cracks. He's a mechanical engineer. He builds things. He solves problems. And here's a problem he couldn't solve with a wrench or a spreadsheet. Here was a problem called the U.S. government doesn't believe our marriage is real. How do you fix that? How do you prove love on paper? This is where American culture and my culture crashed into each other like 2 cars at a red light. In my culture, Vietnamese culture, when there's a family crisis, everyone talks. Everyone cries. Everyone gathers around and says dramatic things like, we will survive this while holding hands. But David's culture? White American, Midwestern, stoic? They suffer in silence. They say, I'm fine when they're drowning. They fix the lawnmower instead of fixing their feelings. I didn't understand this at first. I thought his silence meant he didn't care. I thought his "we'll hire a lawyer" meant he was outsourcing the problem. I was so wrong. He wasn't outsourcing. He was terrified. He just didn't have the vocabulary for terror. Not in English. Not in any language. His father had taught him that men don't cry, men don't complain, men just handle it. So here he was, trying to handle a situation that was unhandleable, and it was breaking him. Let me tell you a secret about American men that no one puts in the movies. They feel everything. They just feel it sideways. My husband didn't say, I'm scared we'll lose you. Instead, he started cleaning the garage at midnight. He organized the tool shelf. He swept the floor. He alphabetized the screws. At first, I thought he was avoiding me. But then I realized, cleaning was his prayer. Organizing was his scream. Every screw he sorted was a "please don't take my wife." Every sweep of the broom was an "I love you." Have you ever done that? Expressed fear through action instead of words? That's actually a very American thing. Americans don't say, "I'm suffering." They say, "I'm busy." They don't say, "I need help." They say, "I've got it under control." And then they collapse in private. The psychologist Brené Brown calls this armored leadership. Putting on armor so no one sees the soft parts. David was wearing full armor.
And it was heavy.
One evening, about 2 weeks after the denial letter, I found him in the backyard. He was standing by the fence, just staring at a tree. Not doing anything.
Just standing.
I walked up to him. I put my hand on his back. He didn't move. I said, "Talk to me." And finally he talked. He said, "I keep thinking about what happens if they say no. If the appeal fails. If you have to leave. What do I tell our son? What do I tell the baby? How do I explain that the government said our family doesn't count?"
His voice was shaking.
His eyes were wet. He wasn't crying, he was leaking. And in that moment, I understood something I'd never understood before. David wasn't my protector. He was my partner. We were both scared. We were both lost. We were both trying to hold up a collapsing ceiling with our bare hands. The only difference was that I cried in the open, and he cried in the garage. Here's the science part, because I know you love this. Psychologists call David's behavior instrumental coping. It's when you deal with stress by doing something physical or practical instead of emotional. Fixing a car, cleaning a room, organizing a closet. It's not avoidance. It's a different way of processing. Men do it more than women, but not because of biology. Because of training. Society teaches boys that emotions are weak. So they learn to translate fear into action. "I'm terrified" becomes, "I'll build a shelf." "I'm heartbroken" becomes, "I'll mow the lawn." And here's the connection to learning English. So many of you do the same thing. When you're scared of speaking, you translate that fear into studying. You buy another textbook. You download another app. You watch another video. But you never actually speak. You're cleaning the garage instead of facing the fear. You're organizing screws instead of opening your mouth. And I get it. I really do. Because speaking English, real English, with real people in real situations is terrifying. Your amygdala screams. Your mouth freezes. Your brain says run. But here's what David taught me that night in the backyard. He didn't stop being scared. He just stopped cleaning. He stood still. He looked at the tree. And he let the fear sit next to him. He didn't fight it. He didn't fix it. He just felt it. And that's the skill. That's the superpower. Not bravery. Not confidence. Just the ability to say, "I'm scared, and I'm going to do it anyway." After that night, David and I made a deal. No more cleaning the garage at midnight. No more pretending. We would face the denial letter together. We would find a lawyer together. We would cry together if we needed to. And we would learn the vocabulary of fear in English together. Because here's the thing about a green card denial. It doesn't care if you're American or Vietnamese. It doesn't care if you fix things or feel things. It only cares about your story. And our story was not over. In the next section, I'll tell you about the lawyer who almost hung up on me and the one sentence that made her stay on the phone. That sentence? It was in English. Broken, shaking, ugly English. But it was real. And sometimes real is enough. The policy that almost broke us. Let me explain something about American immigration policy. Not the boring parts. Not the forms and the fees and the fingerprints. The part that actually matters. It treats love like a math problem. You need X number of photos. Y number of joint bank statements. Z number of years living together. If you have enough evidence, your marriage is bona fide. If you don't, it's suspicious. Love becomes a spreadsheet. And spreadsheets don't care about crying babies or sleepless nights or the way your husband holds your hand during ultrasounds. Our denial letter said we lacked sufficient documentation from the first 2 years of marriage. Here's why. David and I didn't combine our bank accounts immediately.
Why?
Because I had student debt, and he had a credit card from college, and merging money felt scary. We didn't put both names on the lease right away because I was on a student visa and the landlord said it was complicated. We didn't take enough photos because we were busy living. We were busy falling in love, getting pregnant, figuring out how to be parents. We weren't thinking about evidence. We were thinking about each other. But the government doesn't care about your reasons. The government cares about policy. And policy is just a fancy word for rules written by people who will never meet you. The policy says, if you don't have enough documents by month 24, your marriage looks fake. Never mind that we had a child together. Never mind that David's mother called me her daughter. Never mind that I knew his coffee order, his sock drawer, his weird habit of humming 90s commercials in the shower. None of that counts. Only paper counts. This is where I almost broke. Not because of the denial itself. Because of the unfairness. I had done everything they asked. I had filled out Form I-130, I-485, I-864, I-765, alphabet soup of bureaucracy. I had paid $1,225 in fees. I had gone to the biometrics appointment where they took my fingerprints and my photo and my dignity. And still, some officer in a windowless office, someone who spent maybe 10 minutes on my file, decided my family wasn't real. Do you know what that feels like? It feels like being erased. Like someone takes a whiteout brush and paints over your entire life. Every morning I woke up and made breakfast for my son, I thought, does this count? Does this moment have evidentiary value? Every night David kissed me goodnight, I thought, should I be taking a photo of this? Should I be saving a receipt? I stopped living my marriage. I started documenting it. And that's the most toxic thing a policy can do. It turns love into a performance. Let me get psychological for a minute. There's a concept called reactance. It's what happens when someone takes away your freedom. Your brain gets angry. Not sad. Angry. You want to rebel. You want to scream. You want to do the opposite of what they tell you. When the government said your marriage isn't real, my brain screamed back. Oh yeah, watch me prove it. But here's the trap. Reactance feels powerful, but it's exhausting. It's like trying to run a marathon while carrying a refrigerator. You're angry, sure, but you're also dying. I spent 2 weeks in reactance mode. I printed every photo we'd ever taken. All 400 of them. I organized them by date. I wrote captions. I highlighted the ones where we looked happy. I made a binder. A 3-inch binder. I showed it to David. He looked at it and said, this is crazy. And he was right. It was crazy. Because no amount of photos can prove love. Love is not a photo. Love is the 5 minutes after a fight when you say sorry even if you're still mad. Love is taking out the trash without being asked. Love is staying up with a sick baby even though you have work in 4 hours. You can't bind that. You can't staple it. You can't submit it as evidence. So I closed the binder. I put it on the shelf. And I decided to do something radical. I stopped trying to prove my marriage. I started living it. I stopped taking photos for the government. I started taking photos for us. I stopped documenting every shared expense. I started buying David his favorite beer, just because. I stopped performing love. I just loved. Here's the irony. That decision to stop performing was exactly what saved us. Because when we finally found a lawyer, she didn't ask for more photos. She asked for a story. She asked, "Why did you wait to combine bank accounts?" And I told her the truth, because we were scared of money fights. She asked, "Why are there gaps in your photo timeline?" And I told her the truth, because I was pregnant and exhausted and didn't want to look at a camera. She asked, "What makes your marriage real?" And I told her the truth, everything that isn't on paper. The policy almost broke us. But here's what policies don't understand. They're written by people who think humans are rational. They think we follow rules perfectly. They think we keep every receipt and take a photo every Tuesday at 6 p.m. But humans are not rational.
Humans are messy. Humans furget. Humans procrastinata.
Humans have morning sickness and student debt and landlords who say it's complicated. And that messiness? That's not evidence of fraud. That's evidence of being alive. If you're learning English, you've probably felt this same unfairness. You study grammar rules. You memorize vocabulary lists. You do everything right. And then you open your mouth and the words come out wrong. And you think, why isn't this working? I followed the policy. But language doesn't work like immigration policy. Language is not a spreadsheet. You can't prove your fluency with enough flashcards. You can only prove it by being messy, by making mistakes, by saying the wrong thing and then saying it again better. The policy almost broke us, but it didn't. You know why? Because policies can deny applications, but they cannot deny a mother's voice. They cannot deny a father's quiet love. They cannot deny a 4-year-old who says, "Mommy, I want you to stay." Policies are paper. Families are flesh. And flesh wins. Every single time. In the next section, I'll tell you about the question my son asked that changed everything. A question so simple, so innocent, so devastating, that it made me realize I had been fighting the wrong battle. Stay with me. My 4-year-old son's question. Children ask the most inconvenient questions at the most impossible times. Not, why is the sky blue? Or, where does the sun go at night?
No.
They wait until you're buckling their car seat, or wiping peanut butter off their cheek, or standing in the grocery store checkout line. And then they drop a question so heavy that the world stops spinning for a second. My son's question came on a Thursday afternoon. We were in the car. I was driving him home from preschool. It was raining, one of those slow, gray Houston rains that makes everything feel soft and sad at the same time. He was in his car seat, kicking the back of my seat because he was 4, and that's what 4-year-olds do. I was thinking about the denial letter, about the appeal deadline, about the lawyer I hadn't hired yet because we couldn't afford the retainer, about the baby kicking my ribs. And then, from the back seat, in his little voice, the one that still couldn't pronounce spaghetti correctly, he said, "Mommy?" Tommy at school said his mommy said brown people get taken away by police. Are you brown? Will they take you away? I almost drove off the road. Not because of the question itself, because of the casualness of it. He asked it the same way he'd ask for more apple juice. Like it was just another piece of information he needed to file away. But my heart exploded into a million pieces.
I pulled over.
I put the car in park. I turned around and looked at his face. He was sucking on his fingers, a habit I'd been trying to break for months. He looked so small, so innocent, so completely unaware that his question had just cut me open. Here's what ran through my head in the 3 seconds after he asked. Tommy's mom. Who is Tommy's mom? What did she say? Why is she talking about deportation at a preschool drop-off? And why did my son have to hear it? Then came the guilt. The crushing, suffocating guilt that I had somehow failed to protect him. Not from monsters under the bed,
From reality.
From the truth that his mother's presence in this country was not guaranteed. From the possibility that one day he might come home from school and I might not be there. I took a breath. A long one. The kind therapists tell you to take when you're about to scream. And I said, "Baby, Mommy is not going anywhere. Mommy is going to stay right here with you and Daddy and the baby." He said, but Tommy's mom said. I interrupted him. I never interrupt him. But I did. I said, "Tommy's mom doesn't know our family. Our family is strong. Our family stays together." He thought about that for a second. Then he said, "Okay, can I have a snack?" That was it. 4 years old, and he had already learned something that takes most adults a lifetime. Some questions don't have answers, but you can still move on. He didn't need a policy explanation. He didn't need a legal strategy. He needed to know that his mother was not scared. Or at least, that she wasn't acting scared. So I wiped my face. I was crying, of course. Gave him a bag of goldfish crackers and drove home. But something had changed. Inside me. Permanently. Let me tell you about the psychology of social proof. It's this idea that humans look to other people to decide what's safe and what's dangerous. If everyone around you is scared, you get scared. If everyone is calm, you calm down. My son had heard from Tommy's mom that brown people get taken away. That was his social proof. But then he looked at me, his primary source of safety. And I told him we were strong. I told him we stay together. And because he trusted me more than he trusted Tommy's mom, he chose to believe me. He chose calm over fear. Here's the lesson for you, learning English. You have social proof too. You have friends who say English is impossible. You have family members who say you'll never sound like a native. You have strangers on the internet who say your accent is ugly. And every time you hear that, your brain files it away as evidence. See? They're scared. So I should be scared too. But you get to choose your social proof. You get to decide whose voice matters more. Tommy's mom? Or the version of yourself who already speaks better than you did last year. That night, after my son fell asleep, I sat in the dark and thought about his question. Will they take you away? I realized something terrible and beautiful at the same time. My son didn't ask about the green card. He didn't ask about policies or appeals or lawyers. He asked about me. His world was not made of forms and deadlines. His world was made of hugs and breakfasts and goodnight kisses. And in his world, the only thing that mattered was whether I would be there tomorrow. That's when the shift happened. Up until that moment, I had been fighting the denial letter for myself, for my pride, for my right to stay. But after that car ride, I was fighting for something different. I was fighting so that no 4-year-old, not mine, not anyone's, would ever have to ask that question again. I was fighting so that my son could grow up believing that his mother was not a case number. I was fighting so that when the baby was born, she would never know a day of that fear. Here's the science of protective motivation. Researchers have found that people are willing to endure almost anything when they're protecting someone else. A mother will run into a burning building for her child. A father will work 3 jobs so his daughter can go to college. A husband will stay up all night researching immigration lawyers so his wife can sleep. Fear becomes fuel when it's not about you anymore. Your amygdala still screams, but you scream louder. That's what happened to my English. I stopped caring about grammar. I stopped caring about accents. I stopped caring about sounding stupid, because I had a 4-year-old in the back seat who needed me to be brave. And bravery, I learned, is not the absence of fear. Bravery is saying, I'm terrified, but I'm doing this anyway because someone is watching. My son was watching. The baby in my belly was listening. David was waiting. And the government? The government could wait too. Because I had something more powerful than a green card. I had a reason. A real, beating, breathing reason. And reasons, unlike policies, cannot be denied. In the next section, I'll tell you about the lawyer who almost hung up on me and the one sentence that made her stay on the phone. That sentence came from this night, from this car, from this question, and it changed everything. Finding a pro bono lawyer. Have you ever called someone knowing they probably don't want to talk to you? That feeling in your chest, the phone heavy in your hand, your thumb hovering over the call button like it's a detonator. That was me 3 weeks after the denial letter. I had called 11 lawyers. 11. The first 10 went like this. Hello, I need help with a green card denial.
Pause.
Our retainer is $5,000.
Pause.
Can you pay that?
Pause. No?
Okay, call us when you have the money.
Click.
Not mean. Just efficient. Lawyers are not social workers. They sell time. And my time was cheap because my bank account was empty. David's salary covered rent, groceries, and diapers for a toddler plus a baby on the way. There was no $5,000. There wasn't even $500. So I did what desperate people do. I started calling lawyers outside the city, then outside the county, then outside the state. I called a woman in Austin. She said no. I called a man in Dallas. He said no. I called a nonprofit legal aid clinic. They had a 2-year wait list. 2 years. My appeal deadline was 60 days. Here's what rejection sounds like after the 10th time. Silence. Not the sad kind. The numb kind. Your brain stops counting. Your heart stops hurting. You just go through the motions because stopping feels worse than failing. I was sitting on the floor again, my favorite spot, apparently, with a list of names printed from Google. Most of them were crossed out in red pen. Red for no. Red for not interested. Red for your problem is not my problem. David came home from work. He saw the list. He saw my face. He didn't say, we'll figure it out this time. He sat down next to me on the floor. That's when I knew things were bad. David doesn't sit on floors. Floors are for cats and toddlers. But there he was, cross-legged like a kindergartner, looking at the crossed-out names. Then he said something that changed everything. He said, call one more. Just one more. If that one says no, we'll sell the car. Not I'll sell my car. We'll sell the car. That little pronoun, we, was the most American thing he'd ever said. Americans don't do collective suffering well. They do individual heroism. But David was learning. He was learning that my fight was his fight. That my deportation was his heartbreak. That my English struggles were his communication failures too. So I picked up the phone. I called lawyer number 12. Her name was Sarah. I found her on a pro bono list, lawyers who do free work for poor immigrants. The list was 3 years old. Most of the numbers were disconnected. But Sarah's number worked. It rang. A woman answered. Not a receptionist. Her. I said, hi, my name is Lynn. I got a green card denial. I have 2 kids. One is 4. One is not born yet. I have no money, but I need help. Please. I didn't plan those words. They just came out. Raw. Ugly. Desperate. And then I waited. The silence on the other end was maybe 5 seconds. But it felt like 5 years. And then Sarah said, tell me your story. From the beginning. Don't leave anything out. That was it.
No promise.
No, I'll take your case. Just tell me your story.
So, I did.
I told her about the student visa. About meeting David at a friend's barbecue. About falling in love over bad pizza. And worse jokes. About the pregnancy that came faster than expected. About the joint bank account we opened late because we were scared of money fights. About the photos we didn't take because we were too busy living. About the denial letter. About the binder. About the car ride with my son. About the baby kicking. About the 11 lawyers who said no. I talked for 45 minutes. She listened. Really listened. She asked questions like, what does David do when you're scared? And how does your son say, I love you? And what do you want the judge to know about your family? Not legal questions. Human questions. By the end, my throat was dry and my face was wet. And Sarah said, I'll take your case.
Noritane.
No fee. Just one condition. I held my breath. What condition? She said, you have to promise me something. When this is over, when you win, you have to help someone else. Someone who is where you are right now.
Scared. Broke.
Alone. You have to answer their call. You have to listen to their story. You have to say yes when everyone else said no. That's the thing about pro bono lawyers. They're not just legal experts. They're professional hope givers. They've seen the system from the inside. They know how broken it is. And they've decided to fight anyway. Not for money. For meaning. For the look on a mother's face when she realizes she gets to stay. Let me tell you about the psychology of reciprocal altruism. It's a fancy term for a simple idea. Humans help each other because helping creates a circle. Someone helps you. You feel grateful. You help someone else. They feel grateful. And the circle keeps spinning. Sarah didn't ask me for money. She asked me for a promise. Because she knew that the best way to fix a broken system is not to fight it alone. It's to build a network of people who have been through the fire and are willing to reach back into the flames. Here's the connection to your English learning. You are looking for a pro bono lawyer too. Not for immigration. For language. You're looking for someone who will listen to your broken English without laughing. Someone who will say, try again when you mess up. Someone who will take your case even though you have no money and no confidence. That person exists. They might be a teacher, a friend, a stranger on the internet. But you have to make the call. You have to say the desperate words, I need help. Please. Most people don't make that call because asking for help feels like failure. But here's the truth that Sarah taught me. Asking for help is not weakness. It's the first step of courage. It's admitting that you cannot do this alone. And no one can.
Not me. Not you.
Not the most fluent English speaker on earth. After I hung up with Sarah, I sat on the floor and cried. Not sad crying. Relief crying. The kind where your body finally releases all the tension you didn't know you were holding. David hugged me. My son ran in and hugged my leg. The baby kicked. And for the first time in weeks, I breathed. Really breathed. Because someone had said yes. Someone had heard my story. Someone had decided that my family was worth fighting for. In the next section, I'll tell you about the courtroom. About standing in front of a judge with my broken English and my shaking hands. About the moment I realized that my voice, even imperfect, even terrified, was the only weapon I needed. The courtroom scene. Imagine standing in front of a judge. Not a TV judge with a gavel and a reality show. A real judge.
Robe.
Glasses. Face that has seen 10,000 cases and forgotten 9,000 of them. Your husband is next to you, holding your hand so tight that your fingers are turning white. Your son is with a babysitter because the courthouse said no children under 12. The baby is in your belly, kicking like she knows something big is about to happen. And you have to speak. In English. In front of strangers. About the most intimate parts of your marriage. That was my morning. October 17th, 9:30 a.m. Room 412 of the Federal Building. The walls were beige, the color of boredom and bad coffee. The chairs were wooden and hard. The air smelled like old paper and anxiety. Sarah, our pro bono lawyer, sat next to me. She had a thick folder full of evidence, photos, bank statements, affidavits from friends. But she leaned over and whispered, "Forget the folder. The judge doesn't want paper. She wants to see you.
Be you.
Messy, scared, real you." I wanted to throw up. Not figuratively. Literally. My pregnant body had been betraying me for months. Heartburn, back pain, feet that looked like balloons. But this was a new level. My stomach was doing gymnastics. My hands were shaking.
My mouth was dry.
And the judge hadn't even said hello yet. Then the door opened. A woman in a black robe walked in. Everyone stood up. The bailiff said, "All rise." I rose. My knees knocked together like dice in a cup. The judge sat down. We sat down. And she looked at me. Not at my file. At me. Right in the eyes. She said, "Ms. Lin, I have read your case. The government says your marriage is not bona fide. They say you married Mr. David only for a green card.
What do you say to that? What do you say to that?
How do you prove love? How do you prove that 7 years of waking up next to someone, fighting about dishes, crying over babies, laughing at stupid jokes? How do you prove that was real? You can't. Not with a photo. Not with a bank statement. Not with a binder full of evidence. Love is not a document. Love is a verb. And verbs cannot be submitted as Exhibit A. I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. My amygdala, that tiny almond-shaped hijacker, had taken over. I could feel it. The same thing that happens when you freeze during an English conversation. The words are there, in your head, perfectly formed. But the bridge between your brain and your mouth is broken. You can think, "I love my husband" in perfect English. But when you try to say it, your throat closes. Your tongue sticks. Your voice disappears. The judge waited. 5 seconds.
10.
15. The room was silent. I could hear David breathing. I could hear the clock on the wall ticking. I could hear my own heartbeat. And then I remembered something. Something my son had said in the car. Not the deportation question. Something else. A few days before the hearing, he had looked at me while I was practicing what to say to the judge. I was muttering to myself, pacing the living room. And he said, "Mommy, why are you talking to yourself?
Just talk to the lady like you talk to me.
Just talk to the lady like you talk to me." That's what children do, right? They don't overthink. They don't rehearse. They just open their mouths and let the words fall out. Some of them are wrong. Some of them are funny. But all of them are real. So, I stopped trying to be perfect. I stopped trying to sound like a native speaker. I stopped trying to impress the judge with my vocabulary. I just talked. I said, "Your Honor, I did not marry David for a green card. I married David because he makes me laugh when I am sad. Because he does the dishes without being asked. Because when I was in labor with our son, he held my hand and cried. He cried because he was scared. And I loved him more in that moment than I have ever loved anyone." My voice shook. My grammar was not perfect. I said cried when I meant was crying. I said scared when I meant terrified. But I kept going. I told her about the first time David cooked for me, burnt pasta and Jared sauce, but he was so proud. I told her about the fight we had over where to live. He wanted the suburbs, I wanted the city. We compromised on a place neither of us loved, but both of us learned to love. I told her about the night we found out I was pregnant with our second child. David didn't say, "Congratulations." He said, "We're going to need a bigger car." The judge didn't smile, but she didn't frown either. She just listened. Her pen was on the table. She wasn't taking notes. She was just watching. And that's when I understood something. The government's lawyer, the one arguing against me, had all the evidence. The late joint bank account, the missing photos, the gaps in the timeline. But evidence is cold. Evidence doesn't have a heartbeat. And I was standing there, 7 months pregnant, with a shaking voice and tears in my eyes, proving that my marriage was real the only way you can prove it, by being real. Here's the science. Psychologists call this the power of vulnerability. When you show someone your authentic self, your fears, your failures, your messy humanity, they stop seeing you as a case or a category. They see you as a person. And persons are harder to deny than papers. The government's lawyer had papers. I had a story. Papers can be argued. Stories can only be felt. The judge asked David a few questions. When did you know you loved her? He said, when she corrected my pronunciation of pho for the 10th time. She wouldn't let me say it wrong. She said if I was going to marry a Vietnamese woman, I had to learn Vietnamese food names. That's love, Your Honor. Correcting someone so they don't embarrass themselves at your mother's house. The judge almost smiled. Almost. Then she looked at both of us. She said, I'm going to take this under advisement. You will receive a decision in the mail within 30 days. 30 days. More waiting. More sleepless nights. More checking the mailbox like it was a lifeline. But as we walked out of the courtroom, Sarah grabbed my arm. She said, that went well. Better than well. You didn't perform. You just were. That's what wins cases. Not fancy words. Real words. I didn't know if we had won. I still don't, at this point in the story. But I knew something had shifted. I had spoken. In English. In front of a judge. With a room full of strangers watching. And I didn't die. My heart didn't stop. The world didn't end. My English was not perfect. But it was enough. And sometimes, enough is all you need. If you're learning English, you will face your own courtroom. Maybe it's a job interview. Maybe it's a presentation. Maybe it's just ordering coffee without feeling embarrassed. But the lesson is the same. Stop trying to be perfect. Stop rehearsing. Stop performing. Just be you. Messy, scared, real you. Because people don't connect to perfect. They connect to real. In the next section, I'll tell you about the letter that arrived 15 days later. A letter that made me scream so loud, the neighbors called the police. A stranger's letter changed everything. You know what's weird about waiting for a life-changing letter? The mailman doesn't care. He doesn't walk slower or faster. He doesn't knock on your door and say, hey, this one might decide your entire future. He just drops the mail through the slot. Same thud. Same stack of bills and coupons and junk. And every day for 15 days, I stood by that slot like a hungry dog waiting for a drop scrap. Nothing. Then on day 16, something arrived that I did not expect. Not from the court. From a neighbor. A woman I had spoken to maybe 4 times in 7 years. Her name was Margaret. She lived 2 doors down. She was 73 years old, retired, widowed, and spent most of her time gardening. We had exchanged exactly 4 conversations. Once when I returned her recycling bin that blew into my yard. Once when she asked about my son's Halloween costume. Once when I helped her carry groceries. And once when she brought us a casserole after our second baby was born. That was it. 4 interactions. Not friends. Not family. Just neighbors. But somehow, Margaret had heard about our case. I don't know how. Maybe she saw me crying in the driveway. Maybe David mentioned it when he borrowed her ladder. Maybe the walls in our apartment complex are thinner than I thought. Either way, she wrote a letter. Not a text. Not an email. A handwritten letter on nice stationery with little flowers in the corner. She folded it into an envelope, walked it over herself, and tucked it under our doormat. I found it at 7 a.m., barefoot, still in my pajamas, holding a cup of cold coffee. The letter said, "Dear Judge, I am Margaret Hodges. I live at 1423 Maple Street. My neighbors, Lynn and David, are the realest family I know. I have seen Lynn walk her son to the bus stop every morning, rain or shine. I have seen David mow their tiny lawn with the same seriousness a farmer gives to 100 acres. I have heard them argue about whose turn it is to take out the trash, and then laugh about it 5 minutes later. I do not have children of my own, but if I did, I would want them to have a marriage like this. Please let them stay. Sincerely, Margaret." I read it 3 times. Then I cried. Then I called Sarah, our lawyer, and read it to her over the phone. Sarah said, "This is gold. Not because it's legal evidence, because it's human evidence. A stranger, almost a stranger, took the time to write a letter for you. Do you know how rare that is? Most people don't even write thank you notes anymore." Let me explain what Margaret's letter did. In immigration court, affidavits from friends and family are common. But affidavits from neighbors, from people who have no blood relation and no financial stake, are powerful, because a neighbor has nothing to gain. A neighbor doesn't get a green card if you win. A neighbor doesn't get money or favors. A neighbor writes a letter for one reason only, because she saw something real and wanted to say it out loud. Here's the psychology of peripheral witnesses. When you're in a crisis, you focus on the core people, spouse, parents, kids. But sometimes, it's the person on the edge of your life who sees you most clearly. The coworker who notices you're quiet. The barista who remembers your order. The neighbor who watches you struggle with a stroller and thinks, "That's a good mom." These peripheral witnesses have no agenda. So when they speak, people believe them. Margaret didn't know about the denial letter. She didn't know about the late joint bank account or the missing photos. She didn't care about policy or procedure. She only knew what she saw with her own 2 eyes. A family that showed up every day. A mother who never missed a bus stop. A father who fixed a broken fence for the whole block. A baby who giggled in the backyard. That was her evidence. And it was more powerful than any form. I thought about Margaret's letter for a long time. How did she know to write it? Why did she care? I walked down to her house that afternoon. She was in the garden, wearing a wide-brimmed hat and dirty gloves, pulling weeds. I said, "Margaret, I got your letter." "Thank you. But why?" She looked up at me, squinting in the sun. She said, "Because I had a sister once. She married a man from Mexico. The government tried to send him away. They didn't have anyone to write a letter. He left. She never smiled again. I'm not letting that happen to you." That's when I realized Margaret wasn't writing for me. She was writing for her sister. For the version of her sister who didn't get a letter. For the marriage that fell apart because no one spoke up. Margaret was healing her own past by helping my future. And isn't that what community is? Not people who owe you something. People who recognize their own pain in your face and decide, not again. Here's the lesson for your English learning. You are looking for Margaret. You are looking for someone who will write your letter. Someone who will say, "I see you trying. I see you struggling. And I believe in you." That person might be a teacher, a classmate, a stranger on a language exchange app. But here's the thing. You have to let them see you. You have to be visible. You have to walk to the bus stop every morning, even when it's raining. You have to show up imperfectly again and again. Because peripheral witnesses can't testify for someone they've never seen. Most English learners hide. They join groups but never speak. They watch videos but never comment. They practice in their heads but never open their mouths. And then they wonder why no one writes their letter. You cannot be helped if you cannot be seen. Margaret saw me because I was outside. I was struggling in plain view. I was crying in the driveway, carrying groceries with a toddler on my hip, looking exhausted and overwhelmed and very, very human. She didn't help because I was perfect. She helped because I was real. The judge received Margaret's letter along with the other evidence. Sarah submitted it as Exhibit L. L for letter from a stranger who had nothing to gain. I don't know if it made a difference legally, but I know it made a difference to me, because it reminded me that family is not only the people who share your blood or your last name. Family is the 73-year-old widow next door who decides, for reasons of her own heart, that your marriage matters. In the next section, I'll tell you about the verdict. The day the envelope finally came. The day I screamed so loud that Margaret ran over in her gardening shoes, thinking someone had died. Spoiler, someone did die. My fear. And something else was born. The verdict. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday. Not a dramatic day like Friday or Monday. Just a regular, boring Tuesday. I was changing the baby's diaper. Our daughter had been born 2 weeks earlier, a screaming, beautiful, perfect little alien. My son was at preschool. David was at work. I was alone, covered in spit up and sleep deprivation, when I heard the thud of mail through the slot. I didn't rush. I didn't feel that electric jolt of anticipation, because after 16 days of nothing, I had stopped hoping. Hope is exhausting. Hope is a treadmill that goes nowhere. I had decided that the letter would come when it came, and I would deal with it then. So, I finished the diaper change. I washed my hands. I walked to the door slowly, like someone walking to an execution. And there it was. A white envelope. Return address U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services. Not a thick envelope. Those are approvals. Thin envelopes are denials. This one was thin. Very thin. The kind of thin that says, "We regret to inform you," without even using the word regret. My hands started shaking. My amygdala, that little jerk, started screaming. Don't open it. Throw it away. Pretend it never came. If you don't open it, you don't know. And if you don't know, you can still hope. But I had promised myself something after the courtroom. I had promised to stop hiding. I had promised to face every envelope, every phone call, every fear, not with bravery, but with curiosity. So I opened it. I pulled out the paper. 1 page. Single-sided. I saw the word approved in the second paragraph. Not the first. The second. The first paragraph was boilerplate legal language about something I didn't care about. But the second paragraph said, after review of the additional evidence submitted, including testimony from the hearing and a third-party affidavit, USCIS has determined that the marriage between Lynn and David is bona fide. Your application for permanent residence is hereby approved. I read it again. Then again. Then a fourth time because my brain refused to believe what my eyes were seeing. Approved. Not denied. Not, we need more evidence. Approved. The word felt foreign, like a language I had never spoken. I had spent so many months practicing the vocabulary of rejection, denial, appeal, removal, deportation, that I had forgotten the word approved even existed. And then I screamed. Not a little scream. A full body, primal, from the bottom of my pregnant now postpartum soul scream. The baby started crying. The neighbor's dog started barking. And within 60 seconds, Margaret was at my door in her gardening shoes, holding a trowel like a weapon, yelling, "What happened? Is everyone okay?" I opened the door. I was crying, laughing, screaming, all at once. I held up the letter. I tried to say, "I'm approved," but the words came out as gibberish. Margaret took the letter, read it, and started crying too. 2 grown women, standing in a doorway, sobbing over a piece of paper. She hugged me. I hugged her. The baby was still crying in the background. It was chaos. Beautiful, perfect chaos. Let me tell you about the psychology of anticipatory relief. Researchers have found that the moment of receiving good news after a long period of uncertainty is not just happiness. It's a physical release. Your body has been holding tension in your shoulders, your jaw, your stomach for weeks or months. When the good news finally comes, all that tension releases at once. That's why people cry. That's why they scream. That's why they fall to their knees. It's not drama. It's biology. Your nervous system is finally allowed to exhale. I exhaled. For the first time in almost a year, I exhaled. I called David. He didn't answer. I called again. He didn't answer. I called a third time, and he picked up, sounding annoyed. I'm in a meeting. I said, "We won. The green card. Approved." Silence. Then I heard him say to his coworkers, "I have to go. My wife just got her green card." And then he cried. David never cries. But he cried. On the phone. In front of his boss. That's how big this was. That night, we ordered pizza, the good kind with the stuffed crust, and ate it on the floor of our living room. My son asked why everyone was crying. I said, "Because mommy gets to stay forever." He thought about that for a second, then said, "You are going to leave?" I hugged him so hard he squeaked. "No, baby. Mommy was never going to leave." But now the government knows that too. Here's what the verdict taught me. The judge didn't approve my case because I had perfect English. She approved it because I had a true story. Because I showed up to the hearing, 7 months pregnant, and spoke from my heart. Because Margaret wrote a letter that said what she saw with her own eyes. Because David held my hand and answered questions about burnt pasta and Jared sauce. The approval wasn't a reward for fluency. It was a recognition of reality. And that's the lesson for your English learning. You are waiting for your own verdict. You want to know if your English is good enough. You want permission to speak, to apply for that job, to make that friend, to travel to that country. And you're terrified that the envelope will be thin, that someone will say denied. But here's the secret. The verdict doesn't come from the government. It comes from you. You are the judge. You are the one who decides if your English is good enough. And the standard is not perfection. The standard is real. Can you be understood? Good enough. Can you express a feeling? Good enough. Can you ask for help when you need it? Good enough. Everything else is just the first paragraph of boilerplate language that no one reads. The only paragraph that matters is the second one. After review of the evidence, including your messy, imperfect, brave attempts to connect with other humans, you are approved. I kept that letter. I framed it. It hangs on my wall next to photos of my children. Not because it's a legal document, because it's a reminder that I was once so scared I couldn't speak. And then I spoke anyway. And the world did not end. The world opened. In the next section, I'll tell you what the green card actually means to me. Spoiler. It's not about the card. It's about tucking my children into bed without the fear that it might be the last time. What green card really means. You know what I thought a green card was before all this? A piece of plastic. A ticket to work legally. A way to leave and re-enter the country without sweating through my shirt at customs. That's what the government calls it. Lawful permanent resident card. Sounds official. Sounds boring. Sounds like something you keep in a drawer and forget about. But after the verdict, after the approval, after the screaming and the crying and the pizza on the living room floor, I learned what a green card really means. And it's not what you think. The card arrived in the mail 2 weeks later. It was green, obviously. With my photo, the worst photo I have ever taken, because immigration photos are designed to make you look like a convicted criminal.
My hair was flat.
My face was puffy from postpartum hormones. I wasn't smiling. You're not allowed to smile in immigration photos. They want you to look neutral. But I wasn't neutral. I was holding a piece of plastic that said, in official government language, "You belong here." I put the card on the kitchen counter. My son picked it up. He was 4.5 now, old enough to be curious about everything. He said, "Mommy, what's this?" I said, "That's Mommy's green card. It means I can stay in America forever." He looked at the card. Then he looked at me. Then he said the most profound thing a 4-year-old has ever said, "But you were already staying. You never left." Out of the mouths of babes.
He was right.
The green card didn't change my physical presence. I was here before the card. I would be here after the card. The card didn't make me a mother or a wife or a neighbor who walks her son to the bus stop. The card didn't make David love me or my children need me. The card was just permission. Permission from a building in Washington, D.C., filled with bureaucrats who had never met me, that I was allowed to continue doing what I was already doing. So, what did the green card actually change? One thing. One big thing. It changed the fear. Before the card, every night when I tucked my son into bed, there was a whisper in the back of my mind. What if this is the last time? Not a loud whisper. Not a scream. Just a quiet, persistent hum, like a refrigerator that never shuts off. What if tomorrow they come? What if the appeal fails? What if the judge changes her mind? That hum was always there. I had learned to live with it like people learn to live with chronic pain. But it was there. After the card, the hum stopped. Not gradually. Immediately. The night the card arrived, I tucked my son into bed. Same room. Same blanket. Same goodnight kiss. But my brain was silent.
No whisper.
No what if. Just the sound of my son breathing, the creak of the floorboards, the distant bark of a dog. I stood in his doorway for a full minute, just listening to the silence in my own head.
And I cried.
Again. But this time, the tears were not relief. They were grief. Grief for all the nights I had been half present, half worried, half somewhere else. Let me tell you about the psychology of hypervigilance. It's a state of constant alertness. Your brain is always scanning for threats, even when you're safe. It's common in people who have experienced trauma, war, abuse, or, in my case, the threat of deportation. Hypervigilance is exhausting. It's like running a marathon while also solving math problems. Your body is tired, your mind is tired, but you can't stop because stopping feels dangerous. The green card didn't give me a new life. It gave me permission to stop running. Here's the connection to your English learning.
You are running your own marathon.
Every time you open your mouth to speak English, your brain scans for threats. Will they laugh? Will they correct me? Will they understand? Will they judge my accent? That's hypervigilance. And it's exhausting. You can't learn a language when your brain is constantly looking for danger. You can only survive. And surviving is not the same as living. The green card taught me that safety comes before fluency. Before I could speak English well, I had to feel safe speaking it badly. Before I could stand in front of a judge, I had to feel safe making mistakes in front of my husband. Before I could call a lawyer, I had to feel safe hearing the word no. Safety is not a destination. It's a choice. A daily, hourly, minute-by-minute choice to say, I am not in danger. The worst that can happen is embarrassment, and embarrassment will not kill me. After the green card, I started noticing small things. The way the morning light hit the kitchen table. The sound of my daughter's laugh, a weird, gurgly baby laugh that sounded like a dolphin. The feeling of David's hand on my back when I was cooking. These things had always been there, but hypervigilance had made them invisible. I was too busy scanning for threats to notice my own life. The green card didn't give me those moments. It just cleared the fog, so I could finally see them. I called Margaret to thank her again. She said, "Don't thank me. Just live. Just be here. That's all I ever wanted for you." And I realized that's what family is. Not the people who share your DNA or your last name. The people who want you to be here. The people who notice when you're missing. The people who write letters without being asked. The people who say, "Just live." So, here's the truth about the green card. It's not about working legally or traveling freely. It's about tucking your children into bed without a whisper in your head. It's about waking up in the morning and thinking about breakfast, not about deportation. It's about being bored. Being bored is a privilege. Boredom means you're not scared. Boredom means your brain has finally stopped scanning for threats. And boredom, it turns out, is where learning happens. Because you can't learn English when you're fighting for your life. You can only learn English when you're safe enough to be bored. If you are learning English right now, ask yourself, do I feel safe? If the answer is no, then stop trying to learn. First, find safety. Find a teacher who doesn't mock you. Find a friend who doesn't correct every mistake. Find a community that says try again instead of that's wrong. Safety first. Fluency second. Because a scared brain cannot learn. A scared brain can only survive. In the next section, I'll tell you how this whole story, the denial, the pregnancy, the courtroom, the green card, taught me 3 specific lessons about learning English. Lessons that have nothing to do with grammar and everything to do with being human. How this story fixes your English learning. Let me tell you something strange. After the green card arrived, after the fear stopped, I expected my English to magically improve. I thought, now that I'm safe, now that I'm not terrified every second, the words will just flow. They didn't. I still froze during phone calls. I still said, yesterday I go, instead of yesterday I went. I still spent 5 minutes composing a 2-sentence email. Safety didn't make me fluent. It just made me aware of how much I still didn't know. And that awareness? That was the real gift. Because here's what I learned in the months after the verdict. English is not a skill you master. It's a relationship you build. And like any relationship, it has ups and downs, misunderstandings, awkward silences, and moments of pure magic. You don't learn English by studying it. You learn it by living through it. My green card story, the denial, the pregnancy, the courtroom, the neighbor's letter, taught me 3 specific lessons about language learning. Lessons no textbook will ever teach you. Lesson 1. Fear is not your enemy. It's your compass. Remember my amygdala? The almond-shaped hijacker that made me freeze in front of the judge? For years, I thought fear was the problem. I thought if I could just stop being scared, I would speak perfectly. But that's backwards. Fear is not the obstacle. Fear is the signal. Your amygdala doesn't activate for no reason. It activates because something matters. You're not scared of ordering coffee. You're scared of looking stupid. You're not scared of making a grammar mistake. You're scared of being judged. The fear is pointing at something important. Your desire to be accepted, to belong, to be seen as competent. Here's the science. Psychologists call this anxiety as information. Instead of trying to eliminate fear, ask, what is my fear telling me about what I value? When I was scared to speak in court, my fear was telling me, you value your family.
You value staying.
You value being believed. That's not weakness. That's clarity. Fear is not the enemy. Fear is the compass pointing north toward what you actually care about. So, next time you freeze during an English conversation, don't fight the fear. Thank it. Say, oh, you're here because I care about not looking stupid.
Good to know.
Now, what's the smallest possible action I can take while you're here? Maybe it's just one word. Maybe it's a nod. Maybe it's, I don't know how to say this, but fear doesn't have to stop you. It just has to sit in the passenger seat while you drive. Lesson 2. Grammar mistakes are not failures. They are fossils. After the green card, I found a box of old notebooks from my early years in the US. I had written down every mistake I made. I am here since 2015. Wrong tense. She make me laugh. Missing S. If I will win, I will be happy. Wrong conditional. Reading them made me cringe.
But then I realized something.
Those mistakes were fossils. They were evidence of a creature that was once alive, crawling, growing. A fossil doesn't mean you failed. It means you existed. It means you tried. Every mistake you make in English is a fossil of your learning journey. It shows where you've been, not where you're stuck. The only people who don't make mistakes are the people who don't speak. Native speakers make mistakes too, they just make different ones. I could care less instead of couldn't, irregardless. Me and him went. Perfection is not the goal.
Communication is.
And communication happens in the messy middle, not in the clean room of perfect grammar. Here's a challenge. Next time you make a mistake, don't apologize. Don't say sorry for my bad English. Say, that's a fossil. I'm growing. Then keep going. The judge didn't care that I said cried instead of was crying. She cared that I was telling the truth. And truth doesn't need perfect tense. Lesson 3. The reason you haven't quit is because some part of you already knows you can do this. Let me ask you a question. Why are you still here? Why are you still watching English videos, still practicing, still struggling, still hoping? You could have quit years ago. You could have given up and said, English is not for me. But you didn't. Something kept you going. That something is not discipline. It's not motivation. It's evidence. Deep down, you already have evidence that you can learn. Maybe you learned a new word last week. Maybe you understood a sentence without translating. Maybe you laughed at a joke in English. That evidence is small, but it's real. And your brain has been collecting it, filing it away, waiting for you to notice. Psychologists call this implicit self-efficacy. It's the quiet belief that you are capable, even when you don't feel capable. It's not loud. It doesn't shout. It whispers. Remember that time you ordered coffee? Remember that time you asked for directions? Remember that time you didn't die? That whisper is the reason you haven't quit.
And it's right.
I didn't think I could stand in front of a judge and speak. But I did. Not because I was brave. Because I had evidence. I had evidence from every small conversation, every corrected mistake, every time I opened my mouth and the world didn't end. That evidence piled up, grain by grain, until it became a mountain I could stand on. You have that mountain too. You just haven't looked down. You're so focused on how far you have to go that you've forgotten how far you've come. So stop.
Right now.
Think of one thing you can say in English today that you couldn't say a year ago. That's your evidence. That's your fossil. That's your whisper. Listen to it. The green card didn't fix my English. It fixed my fear of using it. And that's what you need too. Not more vocabulary. Not more grammar. Just permission to be a beginner. Permission to make fossils. Permission to follow your fear compass. Permission to trust the whisper that says, you've got this. In the final section, I'll tell you about the happy ending. About my family now. About my children, who speak English with no accent and no fear. About the day I finally stopped being a student of English and started being a user of it. And about the one question you need to ask yourself before you close this video. The happy ending and your turn. So where is my family now? That's the question everyone asks when I tell this story. Where is the happy ending? Let me paint you a picture. It's a Saturday morning, 3 years after the green card arrived. I'm in the kitchen of our small house, not the apartment anymore. We saved up and bought a little place with a backyard. My son is 7. He's sitting at the table, doing a spelling worksheet. His spelling is better than mine now. My daughter is 3. She's wearing a princess dress and eating cereal with her fingers. David is outside, trying to fix the grill because he burned the burgers last time. And I'm making pancakes. The cheap kind from a box, because I still haven't learned to make them from scratch. The radio is playing pop music. My son is singing along. In English, no accent, no fear. My daughter is shouting more pancakes in a voice that could shatter glass. David is muttering something about propane tanks. And I am standing at the stove flipping pancakes, thinking, this is it. This is the happy ending. Not a parade. Not a celebration. Just a regular Saturday morning with burned burgers and sticky fingers, and a fridge full of leftovers no one wants to eat. Here's what I've learned about happy endings. They're not endings. They're beginnings that don't feel like beginnings. The day the green card arrived, I thought I would feel different. I thought a switch would flip, and I would suddenly be complete. But that's not how it works. The green card didn't change who I was. It just removed a roadblock. The road, my life, my family, my English kept going. And that's the secret no one tells you. Happiness is not a destination. Happiness is the absence of constant emergency. It's being bored enough to notice that the pancakes are a little burnt and you don't care. My children are American. They were born here. They will never know the fear of a denial letter or the weight of a thin envelope. They will never have to prove their love to a judge. And that is the greatest gift I could have given them. Not a green card. Not citizenship. Freedom from the fear I carried. That's the real happy ending. That my children wake up every morning and the only thing they're afraid of is spiders and the dark. But let me tell you about my English. 3 years later, I still make mistakes. I still say, yesterday I eat when I mean ate. I still pause during phone calls. I still avoid certain words that feel like tongue twisters. The difference is that I don't apologize anymore. I don't say sorry for my bad English. I say let me try that again and then I try. Sometimes I get it right. Sometimes I don't. But I keep going. Because perfection was never the point. Connection was the point. And I am connected. To my children, to my husband, to Margaret next door, to the checkout lady at the grocery store, who knows my name. Here's the science of post-traumatic growth. It's the idea that people who go through hard things don't just recover. They become stronger. Not because the hard thing was good. Because surviving it teaches you what you're made of. I don't recommend a green card denial as a growth strategy. But I am grateful for what it taught me. That I am braver than I thought. That my marriage is stronger than paper. That a stranger's letter can change everything. And that English is not a test I need to pass. It's a tool I get to use. And now, here's your turn. You've been listening to my story for almost 90 minutes. You've heard about the denial, the pregnancy, the courtroom, the neighbor, the verdict, the pancakes. And maybe you're thinking, that's a nice story, but my situation is different. I'm not fighting deportation. I'm just trying to learn English. I don't have a Margaret. I don't have a Sarah. I'm alone. I hear you, but here's what you're missing. You are the Margaret. You are the Sarah. The person who writes the letter for someone else. The person who answers the phone when someone desperate calls. You don't have to wait for a lawyer or a neighbor. You can start right now in this comment section, in this community, by saying one encouraging thing to another learner. That's how the circle spins.
Someone help me. I'm helping you.
You help someone else. And suddenly, no one is alone. Before I go, I want to leave you with one question. Not a fluffy, Motivational speaker question. A real one. What is the smallest possible action you can take today, right now, after this video, that proves to yourself that your English matters? Maybe it's leaving a comment. Maybe it's sending a voice message to a friend. Maybe it's reading one sentence out loud.
Small.
Tiny. Almost stupidly small. But real. Because here's the truth about my green card. It didn't come from one big, heroic moment. It came from 1,000 small ones. The phone call to the 11th lawyer. The car ride with my son. The decision to stop pretending. The walk to Margaret's door. The deep breath before speaking to the judge. Small actions. Tiny, boring, unglamorous actions. And they added up to a life. Your English is the same. You don't need a miracle. You need one small action.
Today. Right now.
And then another tomorrow. And another the day after. And one day, sooner than you think, you'll be standing in your own kitchen, flipping pancakes, and you'll realize, I did it. Not perfectly, but really. That's the happy ending. Not the end of the story. The beginning of your story. And the best part? You get to write the next chapter yourself. In English. With all your beautiful, imperfect, brave mistakes. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for being here. And thank you, Margaret, wherever you are, for writing that letter. So here we are, you and me, strangers connected by a story about a green card, a judge, a neighbor's letter, and a mother who couldn't say please without crying. But this was never really about immigration, was it? It was about the moment you realized that the thing you fear most, speaking, failing, being judged, is actually the door you've been waiting to open. My English is still messy. My pancakes are still burnt. But I speak now. Not because I'm brave. Because I finally understood that silence is the only real rejection. Now I have a question for you. A dangerous one. What would you say if you weren't afraid of sounding stupid? Who would you become if you stopped apologizing for your accent? Don't answer in your head. Answer in the comments.
Right now.
One sentence. Broken English welcome. That's our secret handshake here. This channel exists for one reason. To prove that real stories teach better than textbooks. And your story? It's not finished yet.
So hit subscribe.
Because in the next video, I'm going to tell you about the day my daughter corrected my grammar and why I thanked her for it. You won't want to miss that. See you on the other side of the comment box.